Atlantic seaboard one fine morning in 1943, an imposing force of American naval air power proceeds to an important rendezvous. This force is the aircraft complement of a new carrier: fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers. With the air group commander leading everyone, they're flying out to sea to join the ship which will be their floating home and fighting base. He is one of many carriers which the American people have built since Pearl Harbor to destroy the enemy in his own part of the world, far away. And there now is our base, powerful and serene. In honor of all American aircraft carriers, let us call her the Fighting Lady. Against a good solid wind with their tail hooks down, our planes come into the broad flight deck of their new home. In case the plane's hook fails to catch the arresting gear, there's a series of stout wire barriers. Number one man on the flight deck just now is the LSO, the landing signal officer, always a flyer himself. Like all aviators, he'd much rather be flying. Come on in and sit down. The plane is out of the groove and he waves it off. Come around another time, pilot, and we'll take you aboard. When planes land, they taxi quickly forward, out of the way. Later, they'll have to be shifted to the stern and rearranged in proper position for takeoff. This is called respotting the deck. Here is our skipper, Jocko, a veteran Navy flyer. Annapolis, 1917. He is not impressed by our earnest efforts, or the flight deck control officers. The skipper calls all hands together and gives us a piece of his mind.
You'll never be ready for combat unless you flight deck crews learn right now to work as a team. Don't you men realize that before long we'll be in dangerous waters? That's too slow. Bear a hand. Watch out. Keep that wing clear. Get it over to starboard. Way over to starboard. Come on, get the lead out of your pants. Now, this is the way your deck should look when you're ready for action.
Our ship, our Fighting Lady, is enormous, wonderful, and strange to us. From stem to stern, the entire ship is a honeycomb of watertight and flame-proof compartments. Far below the waterline are engine rooms, fire rooms, fuel tanks, magazines packed with enough assorted high explosives to blow us all to kingdom come. Gigantic tunnel, nearly 2 city blocks long and wide enough to house 4 freight trains abreast. It'll take us a week, a month maybe, to learn our way around. These new surroundings are as mysterious to us as they are cold and impersonal. Our Fighting Lady is like a huge floating cave, noisy and uncomfortable. Elevators as big as a tennis court carry us topside to the flight deck. The great superstructure rising amidships is called the island. This is truly the ship's nerve center, its fighting brain. 85% of us who make up the Fighting Lady's family are volunteers in this war and have never been to sea before. We learned our jobs theoretically in intensive training ashore. A very short while ago, we were high school boys and college kids, or bank clerks, or farm hands, or factory workers. Now we are blue jackets and Marines, all members of a naval combat team nearly 3,000 strong. In our multitude of new tasks and duties as a team, we're very green, but curiosity and comradeship and the instinct of self-preservation are great teachers. us have to master the delicate and complicated instruments which control the fire of our 5-inch batteries, the guns that must defend the Fighting Lady when enemy dive bombers and torpedo planes attack. We train and train to learn our stuff and earn our E for efficiency. The Fighting Lady's destination is still a closely guarded secret. No one can hide the fact that we are entering tropical waters. Our ship seems more friendly and comfortable now. We greenhorns feel that a suntan will at least make us look like fighting sailors. Even our mascot, Scrappy, has been at sea longer than most of us. Some of the mystery that has been hanging over us is lifted when we enter the Panama Canal. There's a lot of unprofessional nervousness about whether or not we're too big to get through the locks. By using lines instead of fenders, we do get through, as the naval constructors knew all along we would.
Come on, hop aboard. We're going places. For 2 cents I would. You know anybody wants to swap?
Now we stand out into the Pacific, and life aboard settles down into monotony. Here are our aircraft pilots, officers all. Ship's company call them the Glamour Boys. They are the men who fly and fight our planes. All the efforts of all the rest of us are concentrated on putting these people into the air and getting them back again. Most of us are hiding a certain amount of nervousness and anxiety, for many of us are Johnny-come-latelys, reserve officers who only recently learned to fly at Corpus Christi and Jacksonville. Others among us are specialists who trained at Quonset Point, Rhode Island. Reserves are called by the regulars, in a friendly way, 90-day wonders. In return, the Annapolis regulars are called the trade school boys. But whether Quonset or Annapolis, all are bound together in the fraternity, the close fellowship of Navy men. Among the ship's non-commissioned personnel, almost 3,000 blue jackets and 100 Marines, the hottest shots are the air crewmen, aerial gunners, and radio men. These boys and the plane captains are the partners of the Glamour Boys in the air. By non-flying blue jackets, they are called Zoom pigeons or Airedales. And because they receive 50% extra pay for flying, they are sometimes referred to as the bankroll boys. Everybody aboard ship backs up the flying group. This requires the efforts of all manner of people. Many of the jobs are far from glamorous. All the little tasks and services you find along Main Street must be performed by some members of our carrier's crew. For though the Fighting Lady is a powerful ship of war, she is also a sizable American community. Population must be supplied with all the necessities and some of the comforts of home. Doc Sorensen, the pharmacist's mate, is just like a village druggist. Next door is our hospital called Sick Bay. There's only a few patients now, but soon it is to be filled with our wounded. Men like these who perform the humble jobs that make life aboard a fighting carrier more bearable, the barbers and the cobblers, are seldom mentioned in communiques. Weeks pass. Now we are far out into the Pacific, which is a very considerable body of water. Monotony shuts down on us between our duties. Guessing where we're bound is still our chief pastime. Will we put into Pearl? Are we going to Iron Bottom Bay? Or maybe even to the Aleutians? All such gossip and rumor are called scuttlebutt or drinking fountain conversation. Throughout the ship, men get together in little groups to take refuge from the heavy burden of waiting for something to happen. And then one day, out of nowhere, comes a fast fleet tanker, and we're refueled at sea. This tells us something. This tells us that we are not going to Pearl or any other land base for a long, long time. Besides our skipper, we have an admiral aboard, a sea dog who's been a naval flyer for nearly 20 years. Until now, only these officers have known where we are to go. But now Jocko, our captain, confers with the air group commander and reveals the plan. The Fighting Lady has been ordered to make a strike. She will pass through waters where no carrier task force has ventured since the bloody Battle of Midway. Remember, this is 1943, long before we took the Marshall Islands. Weather studies are made, and though this somehow the whole ship senses that something is about to happen. Even before the news is broadcast, there's a new tension, an atmosphere of expectancy. And then we are told we have traveled more than 7,000 miles from Panama, so that tomorrow, August 30th, 1943, we can strike the Jap base at Marcus Island, deep within the enemy's ring of defenses. The evening before our first strike, the air group commander briefs all his pilots with maps and the model of our target. We are sticking out our necks to within 1,000 miles of Tokyo to divert the Japs' attention from other American activities far south and east of Marcus. Those of us who have never before been in battle, that's most of us, ask a lot of questions of those who have seen action.
See gunners. Don't break off until you're practically on the same course and right astern of the enemy. Then push over fast.
Outwardly, we try to seem composed and cheerful, but a lot's going on inside our minds. We question our most inner selves. What'll it be like? How'll we take it? Will we do all right? This is the night when a lot of boys write one more letter home. Among those playing acey-deucey in the wardroom is a chubby 23-year-old from Eureka Springs, Arkansas, Lieutenant E.T. Stover, nicknamed Smokey. That's he sitting on the far right. Having flown 50 missions at Guadalcanal, Smokey has been ordered to take a rest. He'd much rather be flying. Before dark on the eve of battle, our planes are loaded with bombs and gas. So that each plane will be in its precise position for a speedy takeoff, we spot and respot our deck. Now all is perfect. We will strike at dawn. And now, GQ, General Quarters. Every man on the ship goes to his battle station, his special place on the fighting team. George, the barber, will pass ammunition. Leo, the baker, will be a sky lookout. Frank, the tailor, is assigned to a first aid station. Pilots are in their ready rooms. Each squadron, fighter, bomber, torpedo bomber, assemble separately. Flyers get into their flight gear and receive last-minute data and instructions. On the flight deck, our first battle dawn awaits us. Our whole ship is on Harry. The Fighting Lady is hardly 100 miles from the first target of her career. These last few minutes before the order for our first action are the toughest time of all. A wise man once said, "War is mostly waiting." We learn now what that can mean. At last the word comes.
Man your plane. Ready room 3, roger. Pilots, man your plane.
fighters take off first to form cover aloft for the other squads. Then the bombers, heavy laden with destruction. The sun has risen now, and our escorts are alert for enemy submarines. But the Fighting Lady steams boldly toward our target to lessen the distance for our planes when they return. The radio plotting room is the electric eye and ear by which the Fighting Lady detects and keeps tab on all planes and ships for miles around us. Smokey, the fighting ace from Arkansas, has been put in charge of this room for our big day. Hunched among his assistants, Smokey is like a super quarterback on a super football team. He is in constant touch with our entire air group. As our first fighters race in toward Marcus Island, they stay low, hoping to escape detection by the enemy's radar. Then they climb suddenly and dive, a surprise strafing attack on the enemy's airstrips. These red balls floating up at us so lazily are anti-aircraft fire. There is 3 times as much of it coming up at us as we can see, because only 1 shell in 3 is a tracer. What look like fiery pollywogs are tracers from our own wing guns. The Ack-Ack is much heavier than expected, but through it we go to knock out enemy bombers on the ground. All through these battle pictures, realize that we are looking straight down our own gun barrels. These pictures are taken automatically by the same mechanism that operates the guns. Pictures even shake with the gun's recoil. Our eye is now the very eye of our fighting airplane. The enemy's picket boats and supply ships offshore are thoroughly strafed. No longer will these craft bring rice and sake and munitions to Marcus. Our bombers flying higher see the island begin. A moment ago, it looked like a little jade trinket in a cobalt sea. As the fighters and bombers swing victoriously away from Marcus Island, towering columns of smoke show the thorough job our boys have done. Back aboard ship, Smokey is tracking the flyers with care to be sure that none is missing and that no enemy planes are trying to follow them out to our Fighting Lady. As our planes come aboard, there begins an operation almost as exciting as the attack itself. A ballet after battle, with the plane directors as dancing masters. The whirling propellers fill this scene with danger, but now our crews are trained and adept. Landing signal officer performs an eloquent adagio on the Fighting Lady's stern. Warning to the rest of the cast to stay off stage until a limping member can be led out of the way. Pilots go below to report to their combat intelligence officers. They have hot news, good news. They tell what they saw and did, how many rounds of ammunition they fired, how many bombs they dropped, what they hit. what they noticed at the target that was new and different or that may need hitting again. As the reports are added up and our combat photographers develop their pictures, the story becomes better and better. Every single Jap bomber on Marcus has been destroyed. 80% of the shore installations blasted or set afire. Hangars, radio stations, gas dumps, ammunition dumps. Marcus is now a lovely mess. In the radio plot, Smokey's worried. There are planes still up there, and he's wondering about it. They are ours, though, delayed by battle damage. Landing a shot-up plane on the carrier is a crucial test of how well-trained, how alert, and steady a naval flyer is. The Fighting Lady now has met her enemy. In the wardroom, the pilots who this morning felt new and nervous now talk like veterans. We have been baptized by fire and have survived nicely. We of the Fighting Lady are growing up. The admiral of our task force knows the overall strategy of the whole Pacific campaign. To smash straight through Japan's outer network of islands, to recapture the Philippines and land on the mainland of Asia. Thus we will deny Japan supplies from Malaya and the Dutch East Indies and leave her far-flung island garrisons marooned. Then we will reach out and really help our ally China. Months after Marcus, this campaign is well started. Our carrier task forces have been in many battles. And now, early in 1944, the Fighting Lady's target is Kwajalein, the Marshall Islands. These are Jap Zeros, the fighter screen being pierced by our planes and planes from 8 other carriers, preparatory to strafing Kwajalein and bombing it apart. Our fighter pilots have improved with practice, with the confidence that comes from experience. They estimate their range by watching their tracers. They hold their fire until their wing gun bullets converge at 300 yards. Shoot in bursts instead of in steady streams, which heat up the guns and spend ammunition. Kwajalein burning. Very satisfactory. After our bombing attacks and heavy shelling by our surface ships, assault craft filled with Marines and Army hit the beaches. And very soon after that, Kwajalein is ours. Right after Kwajalein, word comes to our admiral that at Truk, Japan's huge and secret naval fortress 1,400 miles to the west, there apparently are some heavy units of the Japanese battle fleet. Perhaps we can surprise them. Again, the Fighting Ladies squadron and squadrons from other carriers take off for combat. A lot of mouths are dry at the thought that our target is mighty Truk. The rear seat gunners look back at the Fighting Lady, wondering when and if they will ever return to her. All that we know about Truk, we know from a few photographs taken by some nervy Marines on reconnaissance just 18 days ago. We hear that it is a complex of heavily fortified islands surrounded by airstrips. with naval anchorages at certain spots among the islands. For the next 2 days, more than 1,000 of our carrier-based planes are going to sweep in on truck in relays. The planes appear to float gently off our bow. Actually, their airspeed is a good 70 knots. Diving in on truck, we again turn on our guns and their synchronized cameras. Truck's defenders are aloft and we smack them hard. That were in men's mouths before this strike began now settle back into place and are singing once more. There's something really grand, something historic about diving in here on this place which Japan has been building and guarding jealously from all but Japanese eyes for 20 years. We dive right in low and take a good look at fighter strips, bomber bases, seaplane ramps. In an almost vertical dive, the pilot may black out or go blind for a moment when he pulls up and out at the bottom. But the camera won't black out. It cannot see the landing of our own bomb, for we'll be up and away before that reaches the target. But it records the hits of other planes ahead of us. To find the Jap fleet here, but most of it's gone. Some lingering ships, including some of their fast fleet tankers, we find hiding in sheltered coves. The vessels which we are now strafing are other fleet auxiliaries, rice boats, transports, and ammunition ships. With bursts of 50 caliber incendiaries and armor-piercing slugs, we set them on fire, rip them open, often wide enough to sink. Ships filled with TNT is not very healthy for pilots who dive too low. But it's hard to tell who's carrying what until the big bang comes. Returning to the deck at 130 miles an hour with a flat shot away, all a pilot can hope to save is his own skin. Here comes our new air group commander. He's had a bit of trouble. His windshield is blotted with blood, and he has to feel his way aboard. Strafing at low altitude, he took a 40-millimeter anti-aircraft burst right in the face. More than 200 wounds, and his plane a sieve. He'll live to fly again. Some planes will... It's a long way from truck to our secret rendezvous in the Marshall Islands. Someday it can be told just where this is. Actually, it is a magnificent new fleet anchorage, an advanced naval base, which we have taken from the Japs and made secure. Now, for the first time, we, who have been operating as separate, relatively small task forces, see assembled the enormous mass of naval power. Over 1 million tons of American fighting steel. New carriers, new battleships, new cruisers and fleet auxiliaries in an amount which Japan could never conceive, let alone produce. That we are able to maintain supply lines over the vast distances of the Pacific is one of the miracles of this war. In the comforting presence of so much power, we relax and refresh our battle-strained nerves.
Hey, Benny, when you going to die?
Who taught you to swim? Hey!
Our ship's post office now does really big business. Letters for us at last from home. Letters from us to friends and families. Our censors know our collective mood, our central hopes and thoughts.
The stuff is really getting out here now. I can't tell you much about it, but oh boy. And the more we get, well, the sooner I'll be seeing you.
All hands are called together. Our old skipper, Jocko, has been promoted admiral. Our new one's name is Dixie.
Men, as soon as I finish talking, we are getting underway. Our fighting lady is now part of what is designated Task Force 58. As you know, our final destination is a place called Tokyo. We'll have to fight hard to get there, but when we drop our hook at Yokohama, I'm going to throw a party. All hands are cordially invited.
Task forces are built compactly now around carriers like ourselves with speedy new battle wagons at our side. A carrier skipper never leaves the bridge at sea because carriers and their planes are the first to strike the enemy or to be struck by him. Our aircraft pilots are constantly on call, for despite the mass of power spread out around us, these are still dangerous waters. Our pilots know this all too well, but it doesn't worry them now, for they're seasoned. They know how. There are a lot of new faces among us, but most of these men, too, have been in action. At places like Hollandia, Millie, Jalua, Palau, Rabaul, Wake, Maloelap. Our rear seat gunners and radio men are old hands now. Some of their faces are different, too, because there have been replacements. A lot of them have been made commissioned officers. There's a saying in the Navy that you never learn to love a carrier until she gets hurt. Well, perhaps we don't really love our fighting lady, but we've become mighty fond of her and almost comfortable, almost at home. Occasionally, our shipboard movies bring us that one thing we crave the most, one touch of something utterly American, one deep breath of home. Like Jocko, our new skipper, Dixie, is an old hell-diving Navy pilot. In their battle caps, he and Admiral Mitcher look like big league baseball managers. Northwest we steam, and never before in history has an ocean borne such a weight of naval power. Not at Jutland, not at Japan's proud boast Tsushima was there anywhere near the force with which we now assert that this is our ocean. This is our air. We're seeking the Japanese battle fleet to prove it. With our cruisers and our biggest new battle wagons present, we are strong enough to hope, really to hope, that we may provoke the Japanese fleet into accepting a fight. We're We're joined by plotting Coast Guard and Navy transports. The Marines again. So, another amphibious assault is cooking. Uh-oh. Our patrols have spotted an enemy search plane and are after her. He's a big bird. 20-ton, four-motored Kawanishi seaplane, the kind we call Emily's. Miss Emily's a tough old girl. Right now, she's screaming for help and telling Tokyo by radio where we are. Hellcats are closing in on her. Emily. Now that the enemy knows where we are, and we know he knows, our brass hats get together on final arrangements for what may turn into another Midway. Our objective, first of many in our drive through to the Philippines and China, will be the Marianas. In battles just ahead of us, we are to make good use of a multitude of weapons, special devices, and techniques which have been evolved through the 30 years since the U.S. Navy first took to the air. Not only did our naval flyers create the aircraft carrier itself, but it was they who devised the torpedo plane and invented and perfected dive bombing. Disposed about our flight decks so that planes can be quickly armed are all manner of death-dealing objects. 500, 1,000, and 2,000-pound bombs. We have torpedoes and incendiaries, and the kind of anti-personnel bombs we call daisy cutters. Some of our bombs are armor-piercing, some for fragmentation. Others have delayed action fuses to prolong the effect of our bombardment for hours after we have delivered it. Here are the new rockets, which pack the same wallop as a 3-inch shell. They weigh little, and because there isn't much recoil, they can be fired from planes. On the eve of battle, we are told to scrub up to lessen the danger of infection in case we're wounded. As well as our bodies, most of us prepare our souls. Always on the eve of battle, divine services are held in relays, so that every one of our fighting ladies' 3,000 sons has a chance to attend. As the eve before battle lengthens, there is the usual waiting. Again, we're reminded that war is mostly waiting. Because all cooks and bakers must soon be at their battle stations, they work all night long preparing a hearty meal of steak and eggs for our 3 a.m. battle breakfast. We are being attacked. We are being attacked by Japanese torpedo planes skimming in after us, wing to water. All they want is one hit on our flight deck. We have nearly 90 planes fueled and loaded with bombs, ready for the takeoff. Each patch of flame is a burning Jap. Surprise attack, 19 Japs are polished off by our ship's batteries. Not a single carrier is hit. We have been fortunate. So now commences another major moment in the Fighting Lady's career. Flight quarters sounds. In this modern warfare, the young plane captains are to their pilots what squires were to armored knights of old. In this operation, typical of many more to come, a lot of other fighting ladies will be involved. And nearly 2,000 carrier-based planes, all of them attacking in air groups like our own. From now on, we... At his post and radio plot, tracking down enemy planes and cursing the luck that keeps him out of the air, Smokey chafes at being grounded on a day like this, especially when targets are juicy ones. All the Jap air bases and military installations in the Marianas, and a special prize package, Guam, the island which we did not fortify, but the Japs did. Now comes word that the Japs have sent strong air reinforcements to Tinian, which flanks Guam. Again, our synchronized cameras record, as no human eye and memory could record, just what our guns and bombs do to the enemy. These pictures enable our air combat intelligence officers to assess the damage as we swoop down upon Tinian. Planes return for more fuel and ammunition, the surface vessels take over. A prodigious naval barrage to prepare the beaches our assault forces are going to hit. Not only our newest, but some of our oldest and proudest battleships are here. The Colorado, the Tennessee, and the USS Pennsylvania, flagship of World War I. To the Fighting Lady, several of our planes, crippled, make a game attempt to land. Now is when the landing signal officer must judge not only the speed, but estimate the battle damage of planes like these. flight deck emergency crews, firefighters, rescue details, and medical corpsmen exhibit almost incredible courage. The pilot of a torpedo plane has been unable to release his load of incendiaries. Burning thermite is spilling out at incandescent heat. In the plane's tanks remain about 75 gallons of high-octane gas. The men who brave this danger to save pilot and crew deserve every citation they get. In the ready rooms, intelligence officers question battle-weary pilots. What did you see? Any Jap carriers in sight? Are you sure they were carrier-based planes? Then from radio plot comes uncomfortable news. Torpedo planes and dive bombers from enemy aircraft carriers are approaching. All hands, man your battle stations. To our engine room go orders for flank speed, which is a few knots faster than full speed, in case we need to take evasive action. All boilers are lighted to let the fighting lady outdo herself if necessary. The engine room people turn on the heat, and the propeller shafts churn like fate in their alleys. The fighting lady leaps through the sea on her guard. Skipper Dixie gears himself for action. So does wise old Scrappy. And now, here they come. Jill, torpedo bomber, miraculously keeps coming through our wall of black. He's approaching us fast with a life that must be charmed. Our gunners throw everything they've got, but still she comes. He's already dead or his release gear jammed. Smokey, the pride of Arkansas, the Japanese task forces. This is the moment we've been fighting and praying for. Every plane that can fly and every qualified pilot is ordered into the air. At last, Smokey gets his chance to fly again.
Pilot, man your plane. Pilot, man your plane.
Philippine trade wind is tearing down our flight deck. Our planes strain forward to rise into it. Our entire air group thunders out behind the group commander. Now our fighters run into a swarm of Jap fighters, mostly Zeros, sent up to intercept our attack on the Japanese fleet. A mad aerial scramble begins, which the boys to this day still call the Marianas Turkey Shoot. 369 Jap planes are shot down in this single day, to our loss of 22. Japanese plane makers have sacrificed strength and firepower for agility. Their planes disintegrate quickly when you hit them. They have no armor plate, as ours have, nor are their gas tanks self-sealing. These little monkeys are fancy flyers. They think aerobatics can win dogfights, whereas we believe in smooth flying and careful shooting. Now, at last, through a late afternoon haze from high altitude, our air combat group sights the Imperial Japanese battle fleet. These are the first pictures ever taken of a great enemy naval formation like this. There it is, that Imperial fleet, crawling around below us in violent evasive action. Us looking down on... He answers us emphatically from the forward turret. When you touch off some of these babies, just watch this one. And now we come home from the Battle of the Philippine Sea. 17 Jap warships have been sunk or severely damaged. Several of our returning planes have been badly shot up. A dive bomber comes in out of gas. He pulls off to starboard, but noses over because his wheels are down. This pilot has 73 holes in his plane, and his leg almost shot away. To clear the deck for other planes, number 30, badly damaged, is jettisoned, given the deep 6. Watch carefully. This man's controls are all but shot away. Steps out of it, smiling. And now it is time to paint up the scores. On this fine morning, just a year after being commissioned, the Fighting Lady is beginning to look like a stamp album. She has done her share, amassing Task Force 58's grand total of 757 Jap aircraft destroyed in a 2-week turkey shoot. But there's another score to add up. Our own casualties. Quite a few faces are no longer with us on the Fighting Lady. Among them, Lieutenant Commander Upson, skipper of our torpedo squad. Lieutenant Pappy Condon. Lieutenant John Meehan. And that fightingest gentleman, Lieutenant Smokey Stover. Yes, Smokey's missing too. Salute them under their country's flag. For they were brave. They were gallant. Others will come forward to take their places. For the battles we have fought on the seas and in the sky are only the beginning. Still hungry for battle will steam our carrier, serene, powerful, unafraid. She and her planes will come home again someday, God grant, but not until the bitter, glorious end. For she is, and we salute her, the Fighting Lady.
Okinawa Jima was the scene of the last great battle of the Pacific War. The capital and nucleus of the bead-like Ryukyu chain, Okinawa was only 495 miles from the coast of China, 380 miles from Formosa, and 415 miles from Kyushu. It screened the East China Sea, insulated the teeming coastal cities of China, and it was the lock on Japan's southern door. A vital link in the imperial mechanism, Okinawa was the funnel through which the enemy fed and reinforced his embattled fortresses to the south. Japanese aircraft, merchantmen, and fleet units paused at Okinawa's airfields and harbors en route to South China, Malaya, the Indies, and the Carolines. Okinawa and the Ryukyus was the Japanese jugular vein. In American hands, Okinawa would represent the first conquest of Japanese home soil, for this island was an imperial prefecture. In American hands, Okinawa would mean the reduction of Japan from a powerful empire to an isolated land awaiting the shock of invasion. In January and February 1945, carriers of the United States Navy probed the waters of the East China Sea, launching strike after strike against the Ryukyus. Okinawa was the principal target for cameras as well as bombs. Off Okinawa, a fringing reef extended seaward, in some places to a distance of 2,500 yards. Behind the reef that girdled the island lay hundreds of miles of unbroken rocky coastline. Naha, once a prosperous port city of 65,000 people, this city had become a constant target and heavily populated. Here the terrain was undulating and contained small coral hillocks. In central Okinawa, the terrain grew irregular. Wooded foothills, escarpments, and terraces replaced the level country. In the north, mountains rose out of the sea to form a virtually unbroken spine in the interior. On overcrowded, impoverished Okinawa, the people carved their terraces over whole mountains in a desperate effort to exist. Aerial reconnaissance indicated that in the coming operation, space would be an ally of the Japanese. To the United States 10th Army, commanded by Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner, went the mission of landing on and seizing Okinawa Jima. Organized prior to the operation, the 10th Army was composed of the 24th Corps and the 3rd Marine Amphibious Corps. Comprising the 3rd Marine Amphibious Corps was Major General Lemuel C. Shepard, Jr., 6th Marine Division, Major General Pedro Del Valle's 1st Marine Division, and Corps troops. The plan for the initial landing of the 10th Army was as follows. The 6th Marine Division was to land on the green and red beaches, which extended generally from a point north of Sobi Town to Zampamasaki. The 1st Marine Division was to land on the right of the 6th Marine Division, between Sobi Town and the Bisha River. The 24th Corps was to land on the right of the 1st Marine Division, south of the Bisha River. Yontan Airfield, the enemy's principal fighter base on the island, was the primary objective of the 6th Marine Division. Located on a high plateau less than 2,000 yards inland from the beach, Yontan Airfield would be required as a base for daylight and night fighter marine aviation. Easter Sunday, 1 April 1945, was the day of the landing. It was designated as Love Day. Under ideal sea conditions and covered by naval gunfire, assault battalions of the 4th and 22nd Marines headed for the beaches of Okinawa. Veterans of Macon, Tulagi, Guadalcanal, New Georgia, Bougainville, Emirat, Eniwetok, and Guam. These Marines had just completed months of extensive amphibious training in the lower Solomons. While Colonel Merlin Schneider's 22nd Marines moved shoreward toward the green beaches, Colonel Alan Shapley's 4th Marines headed for the red beaches, from which they could directly assault Yantan Airfield. The beach at Okinawa was different. Landings were virtually unopposed, not only on the green and red beaches, but along the entire 10th Army front. Over the jagged coral and twisted casuarina stumps, troops moved inland, crouching low. Directly inland, the men found terraces which ascended toward a high plateau. Grotesque limestone tombs had been built into the hillsides by the ancestor-worshipping Okinawans. These were potential pillboxes. With a beachhead established, the attack developed. Advancing over a patchwork of sweet potato, soybean, and rice fields, the troops neared Yantan Airfield. Amtraks lent mobile support to the infantry. Resistance encountered during this phase was light and sporadic. It was quickly silenced by Marine fire teams and riflemen. By noon of Love Day, Yantan Airfield had been secured by the 4th Marines. The big airdrome was found essentially intact. Trapped in their revetments, enemy fighters had been destroyed by airstrikes. A master of deception, the enemy made use of dummies. This shadow-casting straw dummy had been a problem to air photo interpreters. The 6th Marine Division struck out from Yantan Airfield across the brilliant red-soiled expanse. East of Yantan Airfield, contact was made with small enemy holding forces. By L+3, the Pacific had been reached, and the battle for Ishikawa Isthmus had begun. Henceforth, the enemy would have tenacious allies. Space and time were on his side. For the division, success in the north would be measured in speed and distance, as well as by casualties inflicted on the enemy. Troops outflanked the Japanese on the coasts, while battalions of infantry spliced their way into the rugged interior to find the enemy and destroy him. Ferreting him out in the heavy, deceptive vegetation was difficult. Relentlessly efficient, fire teams worked their way into position and then methodically erased snipers. Split-second timing made it possible to seal the enemy in his caves before he cut you down. In the mountains of Ishikawa Isthmus, these dramatic sequences were filmed. Dazed and burned, the snipers survived the blast. While first aid was administered, the prisoner was interrogated. Such interrogations revealed the locations of other snipers, and the hunt went on. Along the coasts of the isthmus, the division was in full motion. By utilizing every vehicle, by improvisation and tireless energy, this infantry division moved at the speed of a motorized unit. The uninterrupted forward movement achieved by the division kept the enemy off balance. Obstacles on which the Japanese had so heavily depended were overcome by the combination of effective equipment and trained hands. Heavy rains turned the coastal flats into a morass, but this obstacle too was overcome. By noon of L+6, elements of the 29th Marines entered Nago, principal northern town. After Nago was systematically searched and cleared, the division was prepared to undertake the conquest of the great northern segments of the island.
Back at the beach, the enemy is with a tide and the coral reef, and success was measured in gross tonnage moved from ship to shore. The modern infantry division is a complex organism. It requires gas as well as guts to move, and for this division averaging more than 5 miles per day over diverse and difficult terrain, the problem of supply was acute. Assisted by the 58th Seabees, the 6th Engineers had labored to make Yungtan Airfield operative. A Marine observation cub came in on L+2. This was the first American plane to land on Japanese home soil since the outbreak of war.
Meanwhile, the 29th Marines were penetrating Motobu Peninsula against a progressively rising tempo of enemy resistance. Simultaneously, the 22nd Marines crossed the colorful broad expanse of northern Okinawa. By L+12, the 22nd Marines had reached rocky Heido Cape at the northern extremity of Okinawa. Now, only a segment of Motobu Peninsula remained to the Japanese in the 6th Marine Division zone of action. Advancing into Motobu Peninsula, the 29th Marines took the village of Unten on the north coast. Intelligence officers studied the unique enemy base at Unten. Here, midget submarines were moved over tracks to protective caves in the hills. Japanese suicide boats were found near Unten. These speedy craft carried explosive charges in their bows for suicide ramming missions. The main enemy force in the north, commanded by Colonel Udo, was emplaced in elaborate mountain defenses at Mount Yaitaki. The 29th Marines drove in the enemy's outposts. Casualties mounted as the enemy lashed back with artillery and mortars to prevent encirclement. Artillery of the 15th Marines pounded the Yaitaki defenses, while the 29th Marines closed an iron ring around the enemy. Prior to the final assault, Colonel Alan Shapley took command in the Yaitaki sector. The colonel briefed the officers of his reinforced 4th Regiment. Plans for the assault were received and checked by platoon leaders and NCOs. Final orders were issued. 81-millimeter mortars commenced a barrage against located enemy mountain positions. In these pictures, more living Japanese have been caught than in any others taken during the Pacific War. With mortar shells lobbing into their midst, more than 50 of the enemy came out of their holes to take up alternate positions. Artillery joined the concert of mortars, increasing the effect. The attacking Marines had come to close quarters with the enemy. This man had just been shot in the hand. With the corpsman at his heels, he took cover. Pressure was brought to bear on the enemy at the base of the mountain. Then the assault commenced. On L+14, the 4th Marines went over the top to engage in a bitter hand-to-hand struggle for Yaitaki Peak. By nightfall, the enemy's last grip on northern Okinawa had been broken. Mount Yaitaki had its price. But Colonel Udo's entire Japanese garrison was annihilated.
On the heels of the capture of Mount Yaitaki came the crushing news of President Roosevelt's death. A pall hung over Okinawa, as over every isolated segment of land or sea where Americans fought their global war. At a joint memorial service, fighting men of the 6th Marine Division paid tribute to their fighting leader. Like the buddies they had lost at Mount Yaitaki, he too had been a casualty. Mourned equally by men of all ranks, all creeds, all colors, Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed on. The faces of these mourners testify to the love which the departed president stirred in the hearts of his countrymen. The invading Marines brought more than fire and steel to Okinawa. They brought democracy. At Taira, an experiment was begun. A town council met under American guidance and proceeded to govern the people. Introduced to the democratic way of life, the Okinawan community flourished. Under Marine supervision, schools and medical facilities sprang up overnight. Working with the minimum of equipment, civil affairs personnel accomplished a miracle in northern Okinawa. From the time of its inception, Taira received as many as 1,500 civilians a day. They came sick, disorganized, and despondent. Their pitifully few possessions destroyed. At Taira, they were absorbed, given new impetus to live. At Taira, they found promise, a promise of freedom from fear and want, and the promise of a new Okinawa.
In contrast to the conquered and now quiet north, southern Okinawa shuddered beneath the impact of two great contending forces. Lieutenant General Ushijima's 32nd Japanese Army was holding its powerful defense line with a force estimated at 50,000 men. The line was anchored on the west of the Asa River, contained the hill mass north of Shuri in the center, and was anchored on the east in the hill mass at Yonabaru. General Ushijima's Naha-Shuri-Yonabaru line was actually a series of cave defenses, closely coordinated and elaborately constructed. Whole coral hills had been carved hollow as far down as 50 feet beneath the surface of the earth. Each of these hills contained barracks, galleys, communication facilities, electricity, and storage space. Each hill was a land battleship carved out of coral, impervious to artillery fire, naval gunfire, or aerial bombardment. The Naha-Shuri-Yonabaru line was the most difficult single barrier to a ground offensive faced by American troops in the Pacific. While the 6th Marine Division was engaged in reducing the north, the 24th Corps had attacked the line, but had failed to secure a penetration. Action flared along the flaming coral ridges between the East China Sea and the Pacific, and casualties rose in the ranks of the attacking divisions. To maintain pressure on the enemy, Major General Geiger's 3rd Amphibious Corps was ordered to take up positions on the 10th Army right front. The 1st Marine Division moved into the lines during the first days of May. Orders for the commitment of the 6th Marine Division were received on 6 May after General Shepard's troops had moved to central Okinawa and awaited further orders. By the evening of 8 May, the division was in column of regiments with the 22nd Marines in assault. On the left of the 6th Marine Division was the 1st Marine Division, and on the left of the 3rd Amphibious Corps was the 24th Corps. The 6th Marine Division's assault of the line was scheduled for the early hours of 10 May. The 22nd Marines were in position to cross the Asa River with the aid of the 6th Engineers and to attack the enemy positions to the south. During the late afternoons of 9 May, the division's sector looked ominously quiet. The brackish, stagnant Asa wound westward to the sea. South of the river, the terrain ascended abruptly toward a high coral hill mass. Under professional eyes, the Naha-Shuri-Yonabaru line looked tough. This line was the reason why Okinawa was the bloodiest of all the sanguinary operations fought for the mastery of the Pacific. In the morning, the 22nd Marines would attack with 2 battalions abreast and their right flank on the sea. After a barrage lasting through dawn of 10 May, the infantry moved out past the Asa River. By 0800, the assault regiment had 2 battalions across the Asa, and the attack developed. A bridgehead of 1,400 yards was held under heavy enemy fire at the close of the first day. Tanks rolled over the Asa on 11 May. They used a Bailey bridge thrown up under fire during the night by the 6th Engineers. Joining the assault battalions, the tanks increased the pressure against the enemy. The battle mounted in intensity and casualties rose. Naval corpsmen, serving with the infantry, ignored the death in the air to tend the wounded. Tanks and infantry attacked the enemy's coral forts near the coast. While further to the east, the battlefield shuddered under the impact of contending artillery. Enemy tank hunter teams, mines, and artillery knocked our vehicles out of action. In this spectacular sequence, the crew abandoned one of our disabled tanks. A rescue tank approached to tow it to safety. The crew returned, using the rescue vehicle for cover. Under a hail of enemy small arms fire, the crew used phosphorus grenades to lay down a smoke screen. As the enemy strove to destroy both vehicles, the disabled tank moved off under its own power. In another corner of the battlefield, preparations were made to attack an enemy hill fortress. While tanks shelled the gun forts, infantry moved into position for an assault. Working in teams of 3 and 4 and utilizing cover and concealment, the infantry applied demolitions and flamethrowers to destroy the fort. On the morning of 13 May, the 22nd Marines drove up the last major escarpment before Naha. Troops following the highway were subjected to unrelenting enemy artillery fire. On 14 May, the last of the enemy were driven from the high ground. The camera caught them first. Then, one of our machine guns opened up. Marines of the 22nd Regiment now looked down on the ravaged city of Naha, sprawling desolately beneath them. Artillery commenced to bombard the city, directed by observers manning our OPs. Below the high ground lay a suburban village separated from Naha by the Asato River. Machine gunners applied direct fire against this target. Infantry worked its way down the reverse slope among the tombs on the hillside. Then, infantry supported by tanks fought a brief, bitter action for the suburb against enemy suicide groups entrenched in the rubble. After several hours, the 22nd Marines held the suburb, and with it, the north bank of the Asato at its mouth. Meanwhile, the battle shifted eastward. The 29th and 22nd Marines strove to reach the Asato River on a broad front to exploit the penetration already made into a breakthrough. Troops utilized the cover of the railroad. As the division advanced, its left flank grew extended and exposed. With all other parts of his line holding firm, the enemy strove to neutralize the gains made by the 6th Marine Division. All available weapons were brought to bear on the enemy. Rockets were effective. But the vulnerability of their carriers forced a hasty exit once their loads were discharged. Self-propelled artillery increased the weight of our firepower. In 4 days, the 22nd Marines had broken through at the Asa River and had reached the mouth of the Osato River. Before the Naha-Shuri-Yanabaru line could be broken, either by a wheeling movement toward Shuri or by a forward movement resulting in the outflanking of Shuri and the capture of Naha, it was necessary that the penetration be developed. Thus, the 22nd and 29th Marines, though menaced by an extended and vulnerable left flank, pressed forward to seize the north bank of the Osato. The enemy's resistance, abetted by his excellent observation and heavy volume of artillery fire from the Shuri Hill mass, made progress difficult. At Sugarloaf Hill, the apex of a triangle formed by 3 small hills, the enemy was prepared to make a final stand in defense of his line. If he held Sugarloaf, the penetration would have been cauterized. If he failed to hold Sugarloaf, the line would be doomed, and the 32nd Japanese Army would be forced to withdraw further south, where it faced annihilation. Lieutenant General Buckner joined Major General Shepard to observe the 6th Marine Division zone of action. As these American field commanders studied an ugly mass of coral and volcanic ash called Sugarloaf Hill, so did Japanese Generals Ushijima and Cho. Antagonist and protagonist agreed that Sugarloaf Hill was the key on Okinawa-jima.
Between 14 May and 19 May, the 22nd and 29th Marines fought the Battle of Sugarloaf Hill. It was a battle unsurpassed in Marine Corps history for the strategic importance of its outcome, for its unrelenting bitterness, and for the lives it cost per foot of ground. The men rose out of the earth and moved toward the hill. They clambered over its barren sides as enemy rifle and machine gun fires swept about them. Carefully, they worked toward the summit. Over the rim of the summit were hundreds of the enemy entrenched in caves. Less than 20 yards separated these Marines from the Japanese. Casualties were treated as the battle swirled about them. The story of Sugarloaf was indelibly written on the faces of the living and the dead.
Driven off by massed enemy fire, the Marines came back for another assault. Sugarloaf Hill changed hands more than 11 times during the battle, costing the enemy an estimated 7 battalions. Its price in Marines was heavy, too. During the 10-day period, our losses numbered 2,662 killed and wounded. In addition, the 29th and 22nd Marines suffered the loss of 1,289 men due to exhaustion and sickness. Back on the summit, the men dug in and fought to hang on in the face of devastating fire. On 18 May, the 29th Marines stood on the hill once again. This time, they had come to stay. Rising to unbelievable heights of courage, they would not be dislodged. By the morning of 19 May, Sugarloaf Hill was ours. Even after the battle, the shifting ash of Sugarloaf continued to reveal the dead. These Marines were identified and removed for burial. The 4th Marines went into the lines and drove toward the Osato River. They crossed this barrier and entered the eastern suburbs of Naha.
The people called it the Rain of the Plum, and it lasted 16 days and nights. It had rained throughout the battles at the Asa River and at Sugarloaf Hill, filling foxholes with stagnant water, making rivers of roads, disrupting supply and communication. The rains closed all overland supply arteries. Amtraks were called into service to haul food, ammunition, and medical equipment over the reef fringing Okinawa's west coast.
Having reached the north bank of the Osato in strength, the division was now able to enter Naha, the prize of the Ryukyus. Complete familiarity with the technique of street fighting, emphasized by Major General Shepard in the training phase, now paid off. Fire teams infiltrated into the maze of rubble, systematically destroying enemy pockets and clearing the city of snipers.
The veterans of the Solomons, the Marshalls, the Marianas, who composed the 6th Marine Division, had kept the image of the city before them for more than 25 days of intensive battle. Most of them had not seen a city since they left the Golden Gate, and Naha, with its population of 65,000, had been the brightest star on their horizon. But the city they found was a graveyard. Its people had vanished with its buildings. Nothing lived in this desert of stone. An occasional arch remained upright. An occasional derelict poked its way upward from the carpet of rubble. As though by miracle, the city's 2 Christian churches were still standing. Only the front of Naha's movie theater was recognizable. Naha's antiquated rail yards were wrecked beyond repair. Bridges no longer spanned the Osato Canal. The 6th Marine Division did not pause in captured Naha. Troops poured through its streets and out into the countryside to the southeast, where contact with the retreating enemy was being maintained.
When their Naha-Shuri-Yanabaru line became untenable as a result of the penetration made by the division at the Asa, followed by its victory at Sugarloaf Hill, the Japanese were forced to withdraw southward. Once out of his elaborate coral fortresses, the enemy was subjected to devastating artillery, air, and naval bombardment. Much of his equipment, personnel, and combat efficiency was lost on the roads during his withdrawal to the south. The Japanese formed a new line based at Yeju Daki Plateau and Masato Ridge, where they were to make their last stand. General Ushijima decided, however, to maintain his garrison on Oruku Peninsula for the following reasons. 1, the enemy could deny us the use of Naha Harbor and Naha Airfield. The harbor was of particular value to the 10th Army because it meant shortened supply lines to the forces that would attack the Yeju-Daki-Masato line. 2, by holding Oruku Peninsula, the enemy could maintain a threat to the rear of 10th Army forces attacking the Yeju-Daki-Masato line. 3, because Oruku Peninsula was heavily fortified, the enemy assumed that weeks of sanguinary effort would be required to reduce it, and this was consistent with General Yushijima's avowed purpose of waging a battle of attrition on Okinawa. To the 6th Marine Division fell the mission of capturing Oruku Peninsula. The enemy watched the division advance toward the Kokuba River and girded himself for an attack from the east. Major General Shepard waited for the defenders of Oruku to dispose themselves on the east, and then, masking his intentions, followed a plan that undoubtedly saved hundreds of Marine lives and cost the enemy his strategic peninsula in less than 2 weeks. At dawn of 4 June, while the enemy awaited an attack from the east, the 4th Marines came ashore on the western beaches of Oruku Peninsula. Having capitalized on the maneuverability of his amphibious force, and having achieved the element of surprise, General Shepard found the Oruku beaches lightly defended. The 4th Marines moved swiftly inland. As the light from the east grew brighter, supporting waves continued to come ashore to develop the beachhead. The surprised Japanese commander abandoned Naha Airfield and attempted to cover it only by fire. Moving southeastward from the beach, the 4th Marines reached Naha Airfield on 4 June and secured it on the 5th. This had been the enemy's principal ferry base for aircraft headed southward from Japan. With the airfield behind them, the 4th Marines pushed northward to the high ground which the enemy was defending. The 29th and 22nd Marines were committed from the east and west, respectively. Thus, by a series of rapid maneuvers, the formidable enemy garrison was reduced to a pocket under attack from 3 directions. Again, the enemy was defending a series of coordinated cave positions. Each fortified hill was overrun and liquidated, and then an adjacent hill came under fire prior to assault. The enemy struck back. Armed with a surplus of weapons, he inflicted casualties. Tanks were used to clear small valleys and ravines between hill forts. Troops moved quickly from hill to hill, for the low areas were covered by the enemy's automatic weapons. When an enemy hill was reached, the grim business of reducing each gun port and air vent by fire team action proceeded. Streams of fire poured into the ventilating system of a fort proved effective. Demolitions. In the hands of experts, TNT was a powerful weapon. It blew in vents, caved in gun ports, sealed entrances and exits. The enemy employed mines extensively, particularly in the coastal flats, roadbeds, and on the airfield. Trained personnel cleared these areas. In addition to standard anti-personnel and anti-vehicular mines, the enemy used improvised tomato can mines. These were filled with picric acid and iron and steel fragments. During the closing days of the Peninsula Campaign, prisoners were taken. This Korean, taken from Admiral Ota's command post, had amputated a section of his own leg and managed to live. Driven from the high ground and trapped in the weeds, the enemy had two alternatives: to die or to surrender. The majority chose to die. But many surrendered, and in numbers that were, until that time, unprecedented in Pacific warfare. Victory at Oruku Peninsula meant the opening of the port of Naha. Dredging operations and reconstruction began immediately with the collapse of enemy resistance across the water. This Bailey Bridge was a monument to the labors of the 6th Engineer Battalion. It was the longest Bailey Bridge ever constructed by the Marine Corps. It spanned Naha Ko, linking Naha with Oruku Peninsula, and had been constructed under fire. The Battle of Okinawa went on. 10th Army divisions attacking the Yeju-Daki-Misato line were making limited progress. The 6th Marine Division moved into the lines opposite Misato Ridge. With the 22nd Marines in assault, the attack jumped off on 17 June. Misato Ridge was a jagged pile of coral. The enemy, scarcely perceptible, defended it from caves and crevices. But by late afternoon of 17 June, the 22nd Marines had taken the ridge and were pushing beyond its reverse slope. Kuwanga Ridge was the next hurdle. Now the Marines could smell the sea at the bottom of the island, the sea that spelled final victory on Okinawa. Behind a wall of fire, they pushed forward until they had crossed Kuwanga Ridge. The 4th and 29th Marines advanced across the last open field. Their lines moved relentlessly forward, pinning Japanese soldiers and Okinawan civilians against the sea. Flamethrower tanks set fire to the last patch of woods left to the enemy. On 21 June, the 6th Marine Division reached the cliff at the southernmost extremity of the island. But below the cliff, a disorganized and defiant enemy remained. Now the tremendous task of capturing or killing the remaining enemy and saving the thousands of helpless civilians began.
From this gargantuan cave, where they had taken refuge, the division evacuated more than 600 Okinawan civilians. Burned, starved, desperate people poured out of this cave at the bottom of the island after weeks of confinement. Most of them were too weak to walk. Most of them could not adjust their eyes to the sunlight after living in darkness. After receiving emergency first aid, refugees were taken by truck to the civilian compound north of Itoman. Those who were able went by foot. Every day, thousands of them poured into the civilian compound. The division handled 24,308 civilians on southern Okinawa alone. Each of them needed food and medical attention. Each of them needed to be screened and organized. Pitiful spectacles. This family typified the condition of the people. Medical personnel worked incessantly. There was little time for sentiment. There were not enough hours in the day to repair these broken people. indomitable Okinawans won the respect of their conquerors. Stoically, they adjusted themselves to their terrible situation, helping themselves wherever possible. Not even the children cried. For the able-bodied males, there was work to be done. After they were screened by counterintelligence, the men were organized for labor on the roads and in the field.
Equally as spectacular and more significant was the haul of Japanese prisoners taken simultaneously from the bottom of the island. Surrender leaflets fired into the enemy's lines by artillery, coupled with other propaganda warfare methods, brought unprecedented results. The 6th Marine Division took 3,254 prisoners on Okinawa, the largest number ever taken by a Marine division in the Pacific War. The Okinawan people watched the miserable remnants of General Yoshijima's 32nd Army trot back to the prisoner of war stockade. The legend of Japanese invincibility was for them eternally broken. Docile and beaten, they climbed into trucks that bore them to the prisoner of war stockade near the division command post. Here they found plenty of silent, beaten company. Each man was searched by trained military police. Each man was interrogated by Japanese language officers, and the information received was checked by order of battle officers and forwarded to higher echelon. At the prisoner of war stockade, there were facial studies for the camera to record. Each face spoke without moving its lips. Each face was eloquent. They spoke of defeat, of despair, of disillusion. These were young faces and old, tired, bitter faces, sullen faces that want another chance. But all were the faces of a defeated people. The 6th Marine Division raised the Stars and Stripes for the second time on Okinawa-jima. They had raised the flag over the north, now they raised it over the southernmost extremity of the strategic island.
The 6th Marine Division left the best part of itself on Okinawa-jima. But with its heroic dead, it left a record worthy of them and of the United States Marine Corps. The 6th Marine Division captured more than 75% of the total area of Okinawa-jima. It captured the two principal airfields on the island. This division captured the city of Naha, largest ever taken by the United States Marine Corps, and the first city to be wrested from the Japanese Empire. This was the division victorious at Mount Yahitaki that won the critical battle of the operation at Sugarloaf Hill. The 6th Marine Division killed 23,000 Japanese and captured more than 3,500, a record unsurpassed. The enemy called the 6th the Tiger Cub, called it the American division that could break up the battle for Okinawa. The enemy was right.
The 6th Marine Division suffered 8,227 battle casualties on Okinawa-jima. 1,622 of these lie buried near the East China Sea. These were men who died on the fringe of the atomic age. These were men who had fought the enemy from the beginning, in the jungle and on the atolls of the broad Pacific, and who had died fighting him on his own soil. These were men who never doubted and never knew the outcome. A day was set aside for those who fell. At a formal ceremony, they were honored by those of their fellows who had survived them. The chaplain prayed for them. The division commander humbly thanked them. Then, their friends bid them a last silent goodbye. Died for God and country.
Early in 1945, our B-29s began full-scale operations against Japan. 1,500 miles to targets and 1,500 miles back from bases at Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. Here, 21st Bomber Command concentrated its massive air power and planned the ultimate crushing defeat of Japan, down to the last bomb. Here was the beginning of the end of the road to Tokyo. After 6 months of reoccupation, there were few signs of war along the quiet summer shores of Guam. The liberated Chamorros were back in their clean native villages, American citizens again, smiling and friendly, unaware that a miracle had happened around them. A miracle that moved mountains of material, equipment, and supplies across the Pacific, that changed their dirt roads into broad highways, that manicured their jungles into acres of black-topped airfields. Nearby, new communities of American citizens had set up housekeeping with various types of self-service. The latest labor-saving devices, few laundry problems, and no modern inconveniences. By midsummer, 21st Bomber Command was in business. Big business. Under General LeMay's direction, the long arm of Bomber Command began punching the enemy with appalling power. From Guam, Tinian, and Saipan, 600 plane missions increased the bombing weight 100% in 2 months. Behind this expanding power was planning. The LeMay plan began on the ground with maintenance. Assembly line technique cut engine change time from 3 days to less than half a day. In shops and hard stands, ground crews worked day and night during the blitz weeks to keep more B-29s on the line. By July, LeMay's Bomber Command is an efficient, well-oiled, well-drilled machine of destruction. Here's a vital cog of that machine, 11 men and a bomber. While they wind up for action, let's find out where they're going and some of the things they're going to do, and why, and with what. How do they set up the longest, toughest bomber mission in history? It began about 12 hours ago in the war room at Guam, with General LeMay and his staff receiving a report on tomorrow's weather in Japan. Tomorrow's forecast is typical.
Nagoya, 8/10 cloud above 10,000 feet. In the east, Tokyo area will be 6/10 at 22,000, 3/10 at 14,000 feet, closing up solid after 11 a.m. Osaka and everything west is reported completely socked in.
How will the general solve that one? His B-29s are up against a blank wall except for a possible opening around Tokyo. The old man considers every vital factor and makes his decision. 4 wings will strike Tokyo at 10 o'clock. They'll go in under that weather and bomb at 12,000. Now it's a question of target selection. First priority in the Tokyo area is number 573. Intelligence informs the general that 573 is already 3/4 destroyed. At the moment, number 574, still untouched, would seem more important. Operations checks the tactical plan for 574. General LeMay orders the required changes, okays the target, and commits all executive details to his staff.
Operations, with his deputy chief of staff and project officer, goes to work setting up the changes. In that plans folder is a mountain of preparation by special sections of intelligence and operations. 1,000 hours of research. Collated facts and figures have been distilled into Tactical Plan 574.
Aircraft will assemble as briefed with 3 groups of P-51s for escort. Smoke markers at 1-minute intervals will be dropped by lead planes to expedite departure from assembly point. 1 squadron each wing will carry M47 incendiary clusters. Balance of squadrons, 500 and 1,000-pound GP bombs fused a quarter-second nose and tail. Altitude of attack, 12,000 feet. Planes of 314th Wing will carry capacity fuel loads of approximately 7,300 gallons per plane. Calibrated airspeed of 210 miles per hour will be flown by all aircraft on bombing run. Radar landfall 3450 north and 140 east will be the same for all planes to afford a good land-water contrast checkpoint. The Navy is requested to furnish the following facilities for air-sea rescue purposes. 3 surface vessels to proceed to positions X. 4 submarines assigned to lifeguard duties at positions Y. 2 Dumbos to orbit at stations Z. 4 B-29s will orbit as super Dumbos at the following positions.
Each section of the plan is double-checked. To supervise certain aspects of planning, Lieutenant Colonel Catton, a former lead crew pilot, was recently brought over to staff as project officer. This officer's extensive combat experience now helps to iron out operational kinks. He will accompany this mission to observe new smoke signals at assembly point. A field order is now dispatched to the wings. Takeoff time is flashed to the controller, who coordinates the vast network of communications gathered here at the heart and nerve center of command. Here in the control room, status panels and a mission board are maintained to show at a glance the countless up-to-the-minute details of all daily operations. Prior to takeoff, each mission is set up on the board to afford a visual progress of the flight, from takeoff to target and return. Colored yarns, 1 for each wing, are laid out to indicate the flight lines, which pass close to Iwo Jima, the halfway point. Proceed as specified in the field order to the proper target. Other symbols are used to mark air-sea rescue positions. A timetable of statistics for each wing as planned and flown is recorded from hourly reports on the status panel, beginning with takeoff time. Veteran crews, it's just another day's work. One more 1,500-mile haul up and down the ruddy Pacific. 15 hours, 7,000 gallons, 4 engines, 11 guys. Not wood. A water jump across 20 degrees of the globe. A continent of ocean. Destination, Tokyo. It's like taking off in Mexico for targets in Canada. The 314th is airborne. 145 planes, 1 minute apart, 67 tons each. B-29 takeoffs are a tough sweat. That first long moment is the worst. Some swear it takes luck, like a wife's stocking, to beat it. At Tinian, 100 miles north, 2 more B-29 wings prepare for takeoff. 134 aircraft from the 58th wing. 100 more from the 313th wing. At Saipan, a few minutes later, the veteran 73rd wing lines up for takeoff. 153 more bombers are added to the mission striking force. B-29 is airborne at 1540. The tower at Saipan relays this information to the controller back at Guam. First and last takeoff times of each wing are recorded here and go to make up the first of a series of tabulated mission reports. Copies of these reports are dispatched to headquarters, Washington, and posted on the control room report board. During that first hour, the B-29s have settled down for the big grind, saving precious gas, cruising 1,000 feet off the water. Ability, experience, confidence ride in each plane. A plan of action for 11 men trained and tested to function as one. The navigator sets the course, logging island checkpoints as they climb past the Northern Marianas, Pagan, Assumption, Morgue, the Pohores. After about 4 hours of flight, the bombers pass close Iwo Jima, the hot rock, a black, gritty pork chop halfway to Honshu. 8 square miles bought and paid for by our Marines. We made some quick changes, cutting away that sulfurous volcanic crust and rolling Iwo's surface into one enormous flat top. 3 big airstrips now launch our 51s for bomber escort over Japan. General Moore and his staff of 7th Fighter Command run the show and direct all air-sea rescue operations in close collaboration with Bomber Command. A last-minute briefing check, just to make sure today's fighter escort knows all air-sea rescue positions. Out on the line, General Moore's P-51s are warming up for the longest fighter flight on record. 7 hours on one engine, extra belly tanks, extra nerve and stamina in the cockpit. About the time our bomber wings are passing Iwo Jima, the pea shooters are taking off, scheduled to join them 3.5 hours later off the shores of Japan. After a rendezvous at Kita, the P-51s head for assembly point, led by B-29s designated as navigator ships. Farther west, our bomber wings grind ahead on the last lap to the Empire. Reports to the controller back at Guam give their flight position, which is kept up to the hour on the mission board. Still at low altitude, the B-29s are approaching the bad weather belt, where unreported storms and cold fronts appear suddenly across the bomber course.
Pilot to crew, we're going to start our climb. Check oxygen equipment. Tell Buck he'd better get out to his doghouse.
As they begin their slow climb to altitude, the crews prepare for the vital business ahead. And from now on till they come off target and head home, it's all business. The central fire control system is warmed up. Superhuman brain power at the flick of a switch. Each gunner flexes his sights and tries the coordinated fire controls with a few short bursts to clear the gun. After pushing up to altitude, the bombers arrive close to assembly point. Air in the pressurized cabin is comparable to 8,000 feet, but oxygen masks are adjusted and ready for instant use. From the southeast, our fighter escort appears with its navigator ships, which now turn off to wait for the fighters' return at rally point. The Mustangs climb in formation to take positions above the boxes of B. And now the first Jap snoopers appear, diving head-on into the formations. Some are suicide fighters trying to ram our bombers. Other Jap fighters drop phosphorus bombs, set to explode in front of the oncoming B-29s. Our P-51s go out after them and know they're tangling with experts. The P-51's job is to protect the B-29s. But some of those Jap fighters filter through and meet the blast of bomber guns. Tail gunner pleads with a nip fighter to come in a little closer. From the turn at initial point, the tight bomber waves move steadily on and get ready for business. Flak and fighters fall off. But those clouds are beginning to close in, and it looks worse ahead. Then just east of Hachioji, the Tokyo area breaks clear. The bombardiers begin to draw bead on 574. Their planes sit tight for the bombing run. Here's where we pay off. Jap aircraft plants and an aerodrome 12,000 feet below are about to receive 4,000 tons of destruction. The first waves of B-29s have already found their objective. Succeeding bomber groups add their devastation to the smoking targets. Tactical Plan 574 is now an accomplished fact. The bombers turn and go downwind across the burnt acres of Tokyo. Close-up camera treatment. Across the bay, and a tailwind speeds them south, down the Chiba Peninsula. This is fighter country, With the first call on the intercom, our Mustangs peel off and go to work again. The big bombers homeward bound, our P-51s drop down for strafing runs, concentrating on definite objectives from here to the enemy coast. Skimming along at maximum speed, the fighters pair off and go to work cutting vital Jap lifelines, blasting away at communications, radio installations, power lines. Swooping down on enemy transportation, railroads, marshalling yards, small suburban factories. Airfield. On to shipping targets. Freighters, fishermen, trawlers. harbor and coastal craft. Destroyer or lugger, it's the same enemy. After strafing, our fighters climbed back to Raleigh Point and the waiting B-29 navigator planes. First sight of Iwo, fuel gauges are down close to empty, but fighter spirits begin to rise. They wind up and finish with a kick, coming past Suribachi at whiplash speed, and zoom into their victory rolls. Once over for each Jap kill. After the last fighter groups are in, all hands sweat in those first limping B-29s. That runway is a beautiful sight as they let down with engines out, low in gas, or beat up by flak and fighters. In 3 months, nearly 2,000 crippled or gas-shy B-29s havened at Iwo. You can understand why those 4 fanboys blessed those Marines and even named their planes after them. The lucky ones are fueled and depart for home bases in an hour. Iwo still has its hazards. Weather can turn this station into a hopeless daymare. Fog and quick overcast often blacks out the airstrip during these crucial periods. That means orders to bail out. Or with luck, a B-29 might drop in for a copybook ditching. From here you can see how the cloud cover up there smothers the runway and realize what one pilot went through. Sometimes a battle-scarred bomber staggers back to Iwo, only to flatten out at the last heartbreaking second. Some miracle, the whole crew got away from their stations to safety before 2,000 gallons of flaming gas enveloped them. Firefighters risked their lives to save the ship. This, too, takes courage beyond the line of duty. Far to the south, most of the wings are nearing their bases. Exhausted crews wait out the last endless hour, when time seems to stop. Their position is radioed in, and the controller gets word of the approaching flight. At last, the familiar Arianas appear on the horizon. The bombers fly across Guam and turn into the landing pattern. hours ago, they left the other end of that runway. It's a pleasure to be back. A pleasure to roll on solid, familiar blacktop. Good to feel the sudden, humid heat, to be among the living, swapping details with the ground crew. Flak, fighters, the close call, the one that got away. But some of those B-29 crews won't be able to talk it over today. 11 men and a bomber that didn't quite make it. Rescue squads tear away the hot metal. Somehow in that burning wreckage, a man has lived to feel those eager, gallant hands. 1 life saved and 10 lost. That's part of today's toll. And there were many other days and nights that took their toll of young American lives in the service of our relentless, expanding air power. By the end of July, our B-29s had all but obliterated the enemy's ability to make war. 1,000-plane missions were going to hit Japan with twice the monthly tonnage that ever fell on Germany. The question was, how much longer would a beaten Japan hold out? In August, we made a test that never was applied to Germany, while great land, sea, and our air forces, which began nearly 4 years ago, was accomplished.